All right. Well, good morning, man. I am glad to be here this morning. I am sure you've seen my face around, or maybe not. And if not, I'd want to kind of start my talk with introducing myself a little bit and giving you some context for this morning's talk. But I'm really excited to be here. I've been part of Regroup for uh, quite a long time, and I actually remember, I remember when this group used to meet on Tuesday evenings at in the War Room in Abbotsford, and there were four or five of us, and I remember that was in the 2017, I think, was the first time I came through, and it was just us sitting with Dr. Dave, and it's grown, and I'm very encouraged in a lot of ways that it's grown, and discouraged in another sense, right? Because it means this addiction is prevalent, and people are hurting, but the encouragement being part of this group is the fact that we are here and you are here because you want to experience freedom, and that's my prayer for each one of us this morning and anyone watching this afterwards. But I just want to give some context before I jump into my journey when it comes to sexual addiction and the freedom I've actually had the joy of experiencing over the years. So, like, my story is very similar to most of us, I would imagine. I was first exposed to porn at around the age of, I think it was about 13 when I was exposed to it, and it wasn't, it wasn't a family member, it wasn't someone that exposed me to it. It was just a curiosity, and being in middle school at the time, people talk about things, and then when you have access to a handheld device, it just becomes really easy to access. And then it took kind of control of my life from that moment on. It became somewhat something that I really dedicated a lot of time to, and I think all of us can attest to that. It's a time consuming addiction, and it was never under my control, right? So not only was I dedicating a lot of my life and a lot of my time, right? And maybe it was, I kept it very well hidden. So it wasn't necessarily something that would be noticeable in my life over the years. But I think about the amount of time that I missed out when it comes to sleeping, I slept, you know, some nights 2 to 3 hours because I was just indulging in this addiction and I couldn't stop myself, right? So it was just never under my control, and I know I'm not the only one that this has been their story, but um, and I think it just, because it stayed secret for so long, my logic as a young teen and is that it really, I rationalized it, right? I rationalized my addiction, and because I rationalized it in the sense that because I was single through my teenage years, it ultimately wasn't too bad. And how can something be so bad if the world tells you there's nothing wrong with this addiction to pornography and sexual addiction. But the reality is, I grew up in the church, and I was very involved in my church and at youth and all these things, and I just lived with a lot of shame and secret guilt that nobody really knew about. Right? I don't think the first time that I shared this addiction with someone was at the age of 20, right? So I spent 7 years or 8 years about kind of holding on to this without really ever bringing anyone in. And that is a shame and guilt just compounding over the years. And yeah, there was a lot of hurt and hangups as a result of that. But now I have the joy of reporting back that I'm about 2,400 days all clear of the PMO cycle since about late 2018. And honestly, it's only by the grace of God and really my wife that I am here where I am, and can report back that I've been experiencing the joy of freedom. And that's my prayer for each one of us, is that we can all experience the joy of freedom. Um, but when I reflect on the many years I spent addicted, I notice a very clear pattern. As I was preparing this talk, I was um, really noticing in my own life a very clear pattern on why I never experienced like real, true, consistent freedom, right? Because over the years you experience, a few weeks here, a few months here, even of freedom, but there was always a moment where you come back to this addiction. Um, and and it was just, yeah, there were so many moments where I thought I had my addiction beat throughout my life, and I was in the clear by my own strength, and yet I fell just right back into the embrace of addiction over and over and over again. And I think most of us would agree, right, that this was the case for a lot of years. If you're here, this has been the case for you. I can guarantee it. But yet, in over the years, I would consistently find myself back in the middle of my addiction, suffering in silence and alone and unable to help myself, unable to do it myself, right? But see, the pattern I now notice after years spent as an addict is I never truly wanted to be free. Right? There's a comfort to my addiction. There was control, there's safety. My addiction could never reject me. And it was always within reach. And no matter how much it would pain me to indulge my addiction, I just couldn't break it. And I think, if I think about it, I guess, in one sense, never really wanted it gone. And so that's why I titled this morning's talk, You Have to Want It. You have to want it. And as I was preparing this, Jesus kind of reminded me of a very specific moment in Scripture. So if you guys have your Bibles, I would encourage you to turn to John 5. I just want to sit in John 5 right now for a little bit, and I want to bring us to this specific moment in Jesus's ministry in John 5, where Jesus brings healing to a paralyzed man, and it's the man at the pool of Bethesda. But he Jesus brings healing in a really particular way that, in my mind, just connected directly into our lives as addicts seeking freedom. So here, let's give you some context to John 5 here. So this is the story of the pool of Bethesda. And if you don't really fully know this story or what even this pool was, it was said that this pool in Jerusalem, it was by the sheep gate, but in Jerusalem was touched by an angel, and that whenever bubbles arose from the middle of the pool, the first person in the pool would experience healing, right? And this wasn't necessarily true. It just This was what was believed about the pool. So people would bring family members and friends, neighbors, whoever they knew that was sick or needed healing, and just have them sit at the edge of the pool. And when they saw the water start to kind of bubble or whatever it would do, they would literally throw their sick and deaf or paralyzed or whatever family member into the pool in hopes that they would be healed. And I like You can imagine the sight, because it's tons of people that most likely can't even swim. So not only are all these people getting thrown into the middle of this pool, hoping that they're going to experience healing, hoping they're the first ones to be in the pool, but then these family members have to jump in immediately to save their sick family member and grab the person who probably couldn't swim. I just like it's such a And there's tons of people at this pool, right? So this is the context in which we see Jesus walk into here. So in John 5, let's start at verse 1. So it says, sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by five covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred while I am trying to get in. Someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. So there is obviously a lot to unpack here, but what just seemed to jump right off the page to me from this passage so clearly as I was prepping this talk are the words that Jesus says to the man before the man experiences healing. What does he say? He says, "Do you want to get well?" And I imagine, the man answers, like, he doesn't say yes or no, but I imagine that he answers with some hurt because he's been sick and paralyzed for 38 years, and who knows for how long he's been at the edge of that pool, right? How many days he's been dropped off there in a row over the years. And just his response is, I'm sure, clearly filled with hurt, pain and long years of trauma. He says, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred while I'm trying to get in. Someone else goes down ahead of me. He's saying, Jesus, of course I want to, but I just can't on my own. I give up. Right? How many times have you said this in your own recovery journey? Jesus, of course I want healing. I just can't on my own. So I give up. I'm throwing in the towel. I'm letting other people get in the pool before me. How easily, so this is something I want us to think about. How easily could Jesus have superseded the man's desire to get well, right? This wasn't necessary for Jesus to ask. God can bring healing without us saying that we want to, right? So Jesus, he's all powerful, God in the flesh. You don't think he could have just said, get up and walk without asking the question that he did, right? And there's a reason that Jesus asks the question, and I think he asks it to each one of us is, do you want to get well? Jesus knows what is best for us, just as a parent, right? Just as a parent knows what is best for their child when they're growing up. And I've learned this time and time again over the last year and a half, now that I have the chance to be a dad. I now understand the difference between instructing and telling my daughter that something will hurt her, right? Jumping off the couch or closing the cupboard doors on her fingers, kind of thing. But there's a difference between telling her and allowing her to experience these things because she's going to learn, right? See, Jesus does the exact same thing with us, but the key is that we are free to decide whether or not we want it, right? So Jesus comes to each one of us in the middle of our addiction and says, do you want to get well? Do you want to experience freedom? And the hardest part is some people say no. Because number one, you have to want it. But number two, it's hard. It doesn't come easy. Recovery is hard, right? Like how many of us have experienced relapses, right? Days and weeks and even months clean, and then one bad decision, one split second decision, and it's back to square one, right? Like I can't have been the only one that has experienced this, right? The reality of recovery and the road to freedom is that it isn't the easy road, right? It's not the wide road to heaven, it's the narrow one. And I can't tell you, in my years of being part of this group, how many brothers have come and gone through this group and put in time and just faded away because there's work to be done, because it doesn't come easily, because there's no finish line, right? And I want to share this story, not to put anyone in a bad light, but to kind of bring awareness to anyone here or watching in another group that this journey isn't easy and there will be sacrifices to make, right? So I had an accountability partner a few years ago that I met with regularly, and it was so encouraging, right? To be talking and open and sharing the struggle and just doing it with a brother, the goal of iron sharpening iron, right? This is the purpose of having a wingman and meeting with someone regularly, right? We hear that term a lot because the goal of brotherhood is to sharpen each other, right? Iron sharpening iron. But over time, we continue to meet regularly, and things just kind of stopped changing for him. And no matter how much I encouraged, I pulled and I prayed, and challenged him ultimately, right? Like called him out, because that's what we're supposed to do as brothers, call out the things that we see in each other. Those days of freedom for him just seemed few and far between. And my heart still breaks for him, and I still pray for him. But our brotherhood of growing together turned into what seemed like me dragging him into freedom and dragging him into recovery without him wanting to, right? And you see, because there were areas in his life that he just didn't want to give control up of, right? He didn't want to give up his internet access. He didn't want to give up his phone. He didn't want to set the necessary boundaries in his life to protect himself from addiction. Ultimately, he just didn't want it. And it's so sad, but I watched him lose his marriage as a result of not wanting it enough to make sacrifices. And it still hurts. It still hurts. Do you hear what I'm saying? Like, do you hear what Jesus is saying when he says, "Do you want to get well?" There's one more key verse in the story of the paralyzed man at the pool of Bethesda that I want to go to, closer to the end of this bit of the passage. You see, Jesus asks the man if he wants to be healed, right? The man says, "Yes, of course I do." And Jesus heals him. But there's more to the miracle than just that. Um, Go down to verse 14 with me. A few verses after, Jesus has healed the paralyzed man. Look at what Jesus says. He says to the man, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." Men, hear me out. This isn't meant to be a threat, okay? This is a warning from Jesus that the healing has been done. The healing has taken place. The freedom is there, but there's ongoing work to be done. You have to want it and you have to put in the work. There's work to be done, right? See, I love the proverb we use here, iron sharpens iron just as one man sharpens another. And what's key in that passage? Iron doesn't sharpen itself. It needs another piece of iron to sharpen, right? A brother needs a brother to show up. A brother cannot sharpen his own sword, because how often can I not see my own flaws in my life, right? What happens when you have a brother in your life, is that you sharpen each other. Iron can only sharpen iron if both iron swords show up. So show up ready to work. Show up ready to make the hard choice to sacrifice yourself and to sacrifice your own desires, right? Because that's something that Jesus calls his followers to: is take up your cross and follow me. Die to yourself. And um, if I think of, my journey, I think there are many elements that have led me to seeing and experiencing freedom from porn and freedom from sexual addiction, but two things specifically stand out far from the rest. Number one is a relationship with Jesus. And I promise, if you make the decision today to pursue Jesus with your whole heart and allow him to dictate the terms of your recovery, not you, but him, you will experience freedom. Like, you can't help but be in the presence of Jesus and experience healing. Right? Like, I mean, that's throughout the entire New Testament. You literally have someone who knows that all they have to do is touch Jesus's garment to experience healing from uh, pain and suffering that this person has been ongoing for, I think, over 14 years. And they know that all I need to do is come into the presence of Jesus and touch his clothing to be healed, right? You can't help but be healed and be changed when you spend time with Jesus. That's number one. And number two is dying to myself. Number two, dying to myself has been a key to experiencing freedom. And I say this all the time, right? Anyone that asks about marriage and about parenthood, I always say I've learned two major things about myself, in marriage and in parenthood. Marriage, when I first got married, I've been married 6 years now. Marriage taught me how selfish I am as a person. And then becoming a parent taught me how selfish I still was, right? So when I got married, it made me realize how selfish I am. And then when I became a dad and thought I had that under control and thought I understood what it meant to put others first, when I became a dad, I realized I did not, and I was still selfish. I have to be willing to put aside my own pride and my own desires for my life and put my wife and my daughter ahead of me if I am to continue to experience freedom from sexual addiction. And so, as I wrap up this morning, my question is, do you want it? Do you want to get well? What are you willing to sacrifice in your own life in order to experience freedom? Are you prepared to wake up early and come to group and interact and be present? Are you ready to tell your partner, your spouse, everything? Are you ready to put your own needs aside and work at your marriage? Are you ready to do the hard work of recovery? Now, don't get me wrong. Please don't hear me wrong. I may have days clear, but it has not been easy. And I wish I could report back and say it gets easier the longer it is. Um, but it's a battle every day, and it's a decision I make every day to be faithful to my wife. right? I remember, but if I think back over the last number of years, I remember day 730 very specifically in my mind. That was the 2 year clean mark. The first time I hit the 2 year clean mark. Um, I, you know, people congratulated me and were proud of me, and I just couldn't help but feel discouraged, right? It was a sobering moment because I realized on day 730 that this is going to be a lifelong battle, that this isn't just going to go away, right? We live in a culture that is just imbued with sexuality and imbued with this this sexual culture. Like, it is just in everything in our life, right? This is going to be a lifelong battle. And I realized then that the work is not going to be over until Jesus comes and makes me whole again. Once Jesus comes back and makes me whole again, then I will stop having to battle this. Um, but that shouldn't be discouraging, right? Like, I know that sounds like a, oh man, super defeatist, right? But that shouldn't be discouraging. That should be motivation, right? Like, God is going to perfect you one day, but our goal in this life, everything we can to imitate and get closer to Jesus, right? But this should be a motivator, right? This is our chance to dig deep and discover what godly manhood is about, right? It's about sacrifice, it's about resilience, it's about a deep love for my wife and my family, and an even deeper love for God. So, men, here's my challenge to you today: want it. Be here because you want to be here, not because you have to. Be here because this is bigger than yourself. Jesus is asking you right now, do you want to get well? And I pray that your answer is a resounding yes. So, with that said, let's talk about it.